Good evening, everybody. So let us begin our lecture today. We were discussing exception handling. Okay, the exception handling mechanism. Every language deals its exception handling mechanism. We want to discuss with C++ and Java perspective. There is a little bit difference between C++ and Java. How these languages handle exceptions. Okay, so yeah. By the way, so if you downloaded this slide last week, so please download it again now. I have updated the slide on our first year experience space. Get the latest copy, okay? So we are discussing exception handling. Exception is an unwanted error in our program that we know that it happens unexpectedly. So what do we need to do? We need to take some precaution or measurements so that we can handle exceptions. So there are mainly two ways to handle exceptions. One, to catch the exception, the statement that might generate an exception or an error. We need to catch that exception and we need to handle that. Maybe we can bypass or we can fix our code that might generate our exception. There is another one way, and there is another way that we can throw the exception. So catch and throw are two different technology, two alternative, opposite technology. By meaning, by the word catch, what do we understand? We catch something, we take something under our control, okay, and we manipulate that. And throw is that whenever we get something, we bypass or throw that away. Okay, so we will discuss, we started discussing exception handling in our last lecture. Mainly we started with Java exception class hierarchy. So this is the class hierarchy, exception class hierarchy in Java. And in C#, okay, so I updated this slide. It is a little bit different class hierarchy. So our exception is direct subclass of object class. But in Java, our exceptions are subclass of throwable class. So there is a little bit difference. Okay, so if you go through, and this picture, actually, if you expand it, maybe you can see this picture is for .NET framework, entire framework for exception hierarchy. So we knew that, we discussed that we can use try and catch block. Within the try block, we enclose the statement that might generate an exception, and we use catch block to handle that exception. So we can use multiple catch blocks, multiple catch statement followed by a try statement. Okay, so after a try statement, we can use multiple catch statements. Okay, so if we have multiple catch statement, only one of them executes based on our exception. Only one of them executes. And we also know that we can use a finally block followed by a try catch block. So that actually what does, it for sure generate or execute the statements whether an exception happen or it does not happen. Okay, so this is a full syntax of try catch finally block. So we can have only one try block, and we can have multiple catch blocks. So catch blocks, each catch block takes exceptions type and exception type exception object, and based on the exception types, a catch block is executed, and there will be a finally block. The finally block executes no matter whether the exception happens or does not happen. So anyone has any questions so far that we discussed in our last week? We gave a real life example of exception handling. So in our real life, we have highways, modern freeways have multiple lanes. So each of the lanes is one of the catch block, and we have an emergency lane that is our finally block. So we say that whether if there is an accident happen in one block, we use another lane, and we keep the emergency lane open and free for emergency purpose, and no matter if an exception or an accident happens or does not happen, we always keep the finally block or that emergency block unblocked. So that was what so far we discussed. Anyone has any questions so far? Okay, that's good. So now tonight we want to discuss something more about, we want to discuss exception types. So in C, exceptions are classified in major two categories, but a little bit differently in C++ and Java. In Java, exceptions are classified into two major areas. It's called checked exceptions and unchecked exceptions. Okay, checked exceptions are exceptions that are checked or caught by the compiler at compile time. Okay, and unchecked exceptions are not checked at compile time, but that might be caught, or that is caught at runtime. Okay, so unchecked exceptions are not caught at runtime, but checked exceptions are caught or checked at runtime. So I gave some example. We discussed some problems, at least one problem here. Can anyone please help me that this is a checked exception or unchecked exception? Okay, the definition of checked exception is checked exception is caught at compile time, right? And unchecked exception is not caught at compile time. So according to the definition, this is a checked exception. It is caught, this is caught as an error at compile time. As soon as we type in our program, we see this error message. Okay, but this exception, this exception, so this line will create an exception. This is unchecked exception. Okay, it is not caught at compile time, but during later run time it will be caught. Okay, so in Java, I'm talking about, let me first talk about Java. So in Java, for instance, the read method, system.in.read method, this is a checked exception. Okay, that is checked by the compiler at compile time, but there are unchecked exceptions. For instance, arithmetic exceptions, array out of bound exceptions, null pointer exceptions, those are called unchecked exception. So if we go to the class hierarchy of Java, exception handling, so these we say usually errors, all errors are called unchecked exceptions. Okay, and all arithmetic exceptions, okay, so class cast exception, null pointer exceptions, these are the runtime exceptions. These are called unchecked exceptions. But IO exception, illegal class, these are the checked exceptions. Okay. So this is a good interview question, the checked exception versus unchecked exceptions. So main point, I added this table. Okay, one thing that if you can even tell them that if you are asked this question, that checked exception are checked by compiler at compile time, and unchecked exception are not checked by the compiler at compile time. That is a major difference, and blah blah, you can add 4-5 differences. The major difference is number one, that one. Okay, so okay, this slide again. So as I mentioned that, so if what kind of exception is that? Let us review. What kind of exception is here? Yes, it is checked exception. And what kind of exception is this one? Unchecked exception. Okay, clear? Okay, but C# has a little bit different mechanism, and it's format of checked and unchecked exception. Let's see that C# provides checked and unchecked keywords. So in C# there are two keywords. One is checked keyword and another is unchecked keyword, but these are not keyword in Java. Okay, these keywords, C# provides keywords to handle integral type exception. Checked and unchecked keywords, specifically checked context and unchecked context respectively. Okay, in checked exceptions, arithmetic overflow raises an exception, whereas in an unchecked context, arithmetic overflow is ignored and result is truncated. So if you so go to the C# .NET documentation. On this page, it has in detail about C# checked and unchecked exceptions. They have some programs as well as how to handle and to describe C# checked and unchecked exception using programs. So please go detail who are taking C# lecture. I added this link, so please go detail to go here to get detailed information. But I got another website like this one. It is simple program, shortcut problems to discuss checked and unchecked exceptions. So here C# checked exceptions. For instance, here sometime if so this is a program, it says if I have a value, okay, variable val integer type, and if you hold the integer type max value over there, and if you add something more, so then what will happen? Our integer type can hold maximum value, but if you add something with it, right, so this will exceed the limit, right? It cannot hold the total result. So what will happen? So it will give you an unexpected result. For instance, this. So this is not max value. So for an integer value, if it gives you this result, so this is negative result. So definitely this is not a positive result, right? You are expecting max value of integer is positive result, positive side. But if you add 2 with this max value, so it should be definitely positive, right? But in this case, it is giving you a negative result. So that means it's unexpected result, right? So that compiler cannot, Java C# compiler cannot give you an error message. It is giving you an error. For instance, but without knowing this error, if you intentionally use these values to somewhere else, so you will get an unexpected result, right? So your calculation will be wrong. So in this case, for instance, C# has the mechanism to to handle this exception using checked keyword. In C#, this is a checked keyword is used to declare a block of code. Okay, this block of code. So now if you check these exceptions, then it will give you this error message. So once you get this error message, what this says, so unhandled exceptions, what is coming from here, it is exception is coming unhandled, right? So it exceeds our data type range. Okay, system overflow exceptions and arithmetic operation result in an overflow. For whenever you give something, so this output, that means you will know that our system will know that we got an exception. Okay, so one of the examples, I like this example because it is short and we can get an idea with shortcut. And similarly, if we use unchecked, there is another unchecked keyword in C#. If we use unchecked keyword to identify this unchecked block, so then whatever we will get, you see that we will get the result. That means we did not check these exceptions, these blocks, so we will get this unexpected our result. So by default actually are unchecked. If you do not use unchecked, that block is unchecked by default. Okay, so there are other examples, and if you go to .NET documentation, then maybe you will get similar but more sophisticated examples. So I like you to go to these pages and do some examples. Okay, so for C# people, I just added those, and please go to the websites and practice. Okay. Okay, there are some software engineering, software development tips actually. We maybe last time we discussed. Write code to catch and handle exceptions generated by invalid user input. Always try to write code with user friendly. These are like general tips how to develop robust application. Okay, so one more thing we need to cover. Another thing is that in addition to, so we just saw that there are some built-in exceptions classes, and there are some methods to handle exceptions, but sometimes these are not sufficient. Sometimes we may need to write our own exception handling message and exception handling mechanism. Sometimes, when you use some app or website, you will, whenever it crashes or it gives you an error message or warning message, sometimes you see that they use customized message. They use their company name or developer name, or they give you thank you or warning in different way. You have noticed that sometimes, right? They use the developer name or company name or group name. So that means how do they do that? Actually, they develop their own exceptions class, and within that exception class they build their own message in addition to the custom message, that is built-in message that is generated by the operating system or system. For instance, there is a way to develop own exceptions, and within the own exception we can give our own customized message, whatever message we can do. So the format of creating our own exception message is that we need to first create an exception class, customized exception class. So how to create a class? We know that we need class keyword. If you save in a Java file, then it starts with public, and this is the class name, and this class, it extends the runtime exception. Runtime exception is a class. Okay, is a built-in class. So once we use the runtime exceptions, then the runtime exception class has some some abstract methods. One of these is the abstract method that we need to override it. So for instance, I'm sorry. So this is the insufficient exception. Actually, maybe okay. Maybe I did a mistake. So actually, these are the constructor. For instance, whenever this whatever. For instance, this is a constructor. Let us discuss this way. So this is, for instance, this is a class name. We are developing our class, and then we are creating a constructor. And within the constructor, we are passing a message, and whatever message we are providing says super message. That means by using super message, what do? By using super keyword, we call the parent class constructor. So what is our parent class over here? Our parent class is runtime exception class here, right? So that means we pass this message to the runtime exception classes constructor, and then whatever message we give over here, that message is displayed at program runtime whenever if it falls into a runtime exception. So let us go for an example. Okay, so access modifier may be public and return type. So this is the actually method. Okay, so the process is that this method it use throw keyword to throw an exception. Actually what it does, actually the throw keyword, it generates an object. So this is, so up to this part is new, after new, and then followed by the constructor name, right? Why do we use that? We know that we use this highlighted line in order to create an object, right? So that means it creates an object of this type that is our built-in type, and it throws that, so it will create an object, right? Throws that object to the class name. So here keep close attention that there are two keywords. One is called throw and another is use throws. Okay, throw keyword is used to within a method to throw an exception object, an exception instance. And throws, you see, this is plural. This is a good interview question. What is the difference between throw and throws keyword? Okay, so what is their function? Throw keyword is used to throw only one exception, single exception. Okay, and throws keyword is used to handle multiple exceptions, more than one exceptions. At least you can maybe easily remember this difference easily. Okay, so how do you remember that? Throws is plural, right? So remember that throws exception can throws multiple exceptions, but throw is singular, right? Since it is singular, so it can handle one exception at a time. Okay, and throw is used within method body, but throws keyword is used within method's header line. Okay, let me see if I have an example of creating our own exceptions. I have several examples. These are from my book. By the way, this program, it has a try block, and also that it has an example that we can use a try and catch block within another try and catch block. It's possible. Okay, we can use a try and catch block within another try and catch block. This is called inner try and catch block, and this is the outer try and catch block. So I have this example. These examples are from my book chapters, and which one I'm looking for. So we can have multiple exceptions, multiple catch statements. You see that I have only one try statement, and we can have multiple catch statements. And one thing that you remember, that you cannot have any code between a try and catch block. That statements, if you put any statement over here, for instance, if you want to put another statement over here, that statement will be considered as an orphan statement. Okay, if you even try to, so this is an orphan statement, so it is neither in try block nor in catch block. So this is an orphan statement. Okay, you cannot have this statement. All statement must go within a method or try or catch block. Even for instance, if you have this class, you cannot have this statement within a print statement within a class. All statement should go, like this statement should go within a method. Okay, you cannot have this one here. So I want to discuss maybe the large one. Okay. Although this will be a large one. So now I want to show how to develop a custom exceptions, our own exceptions. Okay. So in order to develop our own exception, first of all, we need to start by developing an exception, our own exception class. Okay. So this is my class. Since I am putting all of this class in one single file, so this in Java this is my public class. Okay, and this is my non-public class, default class. And you see that maybe I told you. So the name I give it not a weird name. So this program is directly I copied from my book chapters. So when I wrote my book, so then I wrote many programs I practice. Whatever is a J means my Java book, chapter number 14 and program number 12. How did I maintain this way? So all serial number, by looking my program file, I can see that where is this program located in my book. So this program is chapter 14 and program number 12. Okay, I did not change the name, but when you write your program, you should give a meaningful name. Okay. Since I added about 500 programs in my book, so I could not find that many meaningful names, and it was difficult for me to maintain serial. But finally, I figured out that this would be a good way to maintain serial. Okay. So by the way, so this is my exception class. Okay, I give my exception, and it is extending one of the exception, built-in exception. Maybe it can be IO exception or runtime exception, any exception. Okay, so here, as we know that, let me go back to our exception class hierarchy. So since I can give, so based on my exception, I can give IO exception or runtime exception or exception or throwable, whatever I like. I can give I can extend any class. So just I extended the exception class. Okay, and this is my exception class constructor, right? It is a constructor, right? So what is this constructor is doing? So this is super.message. So super is keyword is used here to call this exceptions class constructor. This is the use of super. Okay, let us go, and in my main program, for instance, somewhere, or for a long time ago I did this, I cannot remember, let me see. So whatever I do have, I have x equal to 1 and y equal to 10,000, or 100,000, sorry, and g will be x divided by y, so it should be a very small number. If I said if my g is less than 0.001, then throw new exception. So what do we understand from this statement? So this is a statement with new followed by a constructor name, right? We know that this part is used to create an object, right? So we are not giving this object a name. Okay, maybe I gave an example for this in some of my classes. In some countries, maybe in my country, Bangladesh, I have seen that there are situations like if a newborn baby is dead during his born time, or before born, okay, the baby is not given a name. And the baby is buried without giving a name. But here maybe in the USA or developed country, every baby is born, they are given a name maybe in hospital, and they are given a birth certificate and death certificate, right? But for instance, some countries, if a baby is prematurely born and dead, so there no name is given to that baby, because the people know that they need to bury this baby, right? So they do not give any name. So for instance, this kind of object we are creating over here. So we will use one time. As soon as we create it, we will throw it. So we will not use it for second time. So this is why we are not giving a name for this object, okay? In our programming, you will see this code, especially if you start developing apps, or even you have noticed that in our GUI programs, there are a large number of codes, okay, anonymous code those are called, without that generate an object and does something with that object, but object is not given a name. For instance, this is that kind, okay. So do not be misled, this creates an object. Of what type? My exception type object, okay? And it passes this message, and when this passes this message will go to here, right? And through the super, actually this message will go to this exception class, okay? So maybe I can show you in one line. So if I say maybe this way, of course. Okay, so now everything online, right? Okay, so once I pass this message to this constructor, so through this constructor it will pass this message to this super, right? And super will pass this message to exception class, okay? And this is in my try block, and in the catch block what I am doing, I am using my exception class type object. Previously when we got an exception, you see that we used built-in exception type object, right? So we said e dot track trace or something. We said arithmetic exception. This is a built-in exception type object E, and we set E dot print text trace. But here what we are doing here, this one, right? Since we want to use our own exceptions type, so instead of using built-in exception, we are using creating an object, using an object of our own exception type, right? And then whatever I say, for instance, if you do my own exception type dot get message, okay, so the get message is getter method, okay, and what it will do, actually it will display this message, okay. And we know that finally block, I just gave a finally block just for nothing, maybe the finally block, this statement will be executed. Okay, so let us run this program and see if it works. Okay, it works. Okay, so you see this line is called user defined exception because it made our condition, right? Made our condition because this value is this value G value is less than 0.001, so it made our condition, and then whatever I gave, so here this message is generated over here, this line, so the message result is too small, and this last statement is that statement. So this is a way how to declare, how to create our own exception, okay. So if you understand this small example, then maybe you will be able to develop your own exception class, and you can handle your exception, right? So like most companies, they give their company name and logo over here, company name and their old message over here. Okay, so for instance, if I would give my my company profile, say I would say CSITEd experts. Okay, so if I give this example message over here, it will show me, right? So people become happy. Oh, that this shows as their customized exceptions. So anyone has any question? Okay, so if you don't have any question, I have a few questions. Okay, so I discussed this. So now tell me, what is the difference between throw and throws keyword? You tell me. Yes.
The throw keyword can only be used inside the
Method. Yes. It can throw only one exception, right?
And the throw
Okay.
is in the main.
Yeah, that is in the header. Any method's header, main method's header or any method's header line, and it can throw multiple exceptions, right? Okay, that's good. At least if you know one thing, then these are the another examples that you can, other definition you can do. Okay, so I got different type. This is the thing that I got from online. Okay. Okay, there is this another interview questions. Sometimes people ask, what is the difference between final, finally, and finalized keyword in Java? Okay, in Java there is a final keyword. We use final like static with static final to declare a constant. So people, I got it from online. So they said constant variable. Constant is not a variable. A variable is not a constant. Like a variable like a constant. So there is a mistake over here. It's not my own decision. I will fix it later. Okay. To create a constant, and final is a method that prevents method overriding. If you declare a method on the header line, you put final, you cannot override that method. Okay. And final, if you make a class final, then you cannot inherit that class. Okay, and there is also a finally keyword. Okay, final or finally, good interview question. What is the difference between final and finally? Finally is a block, right? We use finally block we use in order to execute some statements that is executed for sure whether an exception happens or does not happen. Okay, a finally block is followed by a try block. Okay, it follows a try block. Okay, and there is a finalize is method. There is a finalize method is to use cleanup, for instance, is to clean up memory. Dynamic this is part of dynamic programming, that is not part of our course. So for instance, this is garbage collection. Java does it automatically. Compiler does it automatically. So whenever you have some unused variable or object, so if your program is getting huge and larger, it throws unused object. That they use finalize methods for garbage collection purpose. Okay, we are not discussing garbage collection here. Maybe you will learn that in your data structure or advanced algorithm class. So this is an example of there is some difference between final, finally, and finalized keywords. If you go for the interview, please be prepared. Especially for this chapter, there are multiple interview questions. If you go for the interview, definitely you will be asked some questions from this chapter. Okay, finally we are almost at the end. So now let me summarize. Okay, so everything. So what we have learned in this chapter, so we have a try block. The try block will be executed a sensitive code which can throw an exceptions, right? Throw exceptions. And the catch block will be used to whenever an exception happens, okay, it is used to either to catch and handles that exception. Although I got it from internet, it says throws is thrown. Okay, is thrown in the try block. This is okay. Whatever exception is thrown by the try block, that is caught in the caught block, catch block. Okay, and finally block is called in every case after the try catch block, even if the exception is not caught or if your previous block breaks the execution flow if it executes. Okay, the throw keyword is allow us to throw an exception. Good thing you have only one exception, okay, which you usually define within a method, and the throws keyword is used as in methods. This a prototype or header line, okay, is used to specify that your method might throw exceptions of the specific type. Okay, that's thing. It says might word keyword. We should highlight this one. It is useful when you have checked exception that you have to handle that you don't want to catch in your current method. Sometimes that if you know that if there will be an exception, but if you don't want to catch it, just when it comes is that bypass it, throw it. Then we use those keywords. Anyone has any question about exception and exception handling? So in your test, you will not in test 3. Okay, in your final test, final exam, you will get some questions about at least 10 points or 20 points you will get from exception handling. Okay, anyone has any question?